Hello, and welcome back to the Declutter podcast, where we are having all conversations, decluttering your mind and decluttering your home so that you can live the life of your dreams with pristine health and high performance. And when we're talking about decluttering your mind and your body and your home, the mold stuff comes up so much. And I know some of you listening have heard my story, and I reference it a lot through pretty much everything that I do because it is really an epidemic. So I'm super excited to have Corey Levy here, who is really just a mold expert in like all of the different facets. So we're going to kind of get into, what mold actually is, taking out some of the typical things that people say when they have mold, like those feelings that come up, maybe those like fears and anxieties, and then really what that process is like of decluttering it throughout your entire life. And so I'm just super excited to have Corey here. And I definitely want to make sure that you do read his whole bio because it's like really amazing. And it's just wonderful to see someone who's so multifaceted in their background, but like really everything comes back to your passion of letting people have clean air. So thank you for what you're doing so that we can have clean air.
Thank you. Yeah, it was almost like it was thrusted upon me, but then I really actually enjoy what I do. As you'll see in my bio, I'm actually a second generation indoor air quality expert, which means my dad had me in crawl spaces at like 17 years old, which, at that time was like borderline, is this legal? But anything to hang out with my dad, who's like continued to be my mentor through my career. And I actually really enjoyed it because to what you just said, I remember the day when I was on an inspection with him, and we were in somebody's house. It was a sales transaction. They were selling their home, and actually the homeowner who was selling had come up to us and said, "Hey, do you know any doctors? Because I've just really felt not great in my home." Which, reflecting backwards, why would you tell that to somebody who's trying to find mold problems in your house while you're selling your home? Probably not the greatest thing, but obviously very clearly that they were suffering, right? And it was
Yeah,
actually the catalyst to why they were moving and they weren't getting the answers that they needed. And we knew nobody. We didn't know anybody in the industry, no doctors. We were what I would call kind of like your run of the mill, like average type of home inspector or mold inspection company. And so we took it upon ourselves to go to what at the time was called the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. And we showed up to a room of over 300 doctors, and we were the only environmental specialists in the room. And they were even blown away that we were even there. Um, and it's evolved in that time. And to your point, I've devoted, my family has devoted for the past 2 decades now, really focusing on working with people that are not feeling well, right? Or really want to be peak performers, being ahead of the impact that can come from exposure to mold.
absolutely. And I love that that person did ask you because it was like totally divine appointment, right?
Yeah,
And you entered
yeah,
this family, and I love just picturing you with those doctors, especially when you're like, this is what I do, and people are like, what? It's like it's all connected.
yeah.
And so I would help to hear more about when, someone for the first time maybe is like, wait, oh yeah, I feel like I might have mold, and like maybe that might have something to do with my health, but like maybe it's not as severe as I think, or maybe the worst thought, right? Like maybe there's nothing I can do about it. What would you say to that person?
Wow, yeah, that's a great question, and there's a lot there. I think the first thing, talking about the not sure, there's a lot of ways you can screen the home, which I'll get through in a moment, and even down to how individuals react to the exposure of mold can be significantly different as well. We were chatting before we even hit record, and you shared with me like your story and your journey, and in some cases you don't feel anything, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
was, you didn't even know. Yeah. And so, you know, when you look at the impact, there's so many things that creates anxiety or spinning, as I like to call it. Like when we get on a phone call with a client and they're spinning, right? They're reading all this stuff online and maybe their practitioner doesn't believe them. They've been sick for years, and it's just like merry-go-round of treatment, of not getting better. And then the word mold comes up somehow, and they're like, oh my God, how am I going to pay for this? I read online, I got to throw all my contents away, I got to do all these things, and my treatment plan is going to be this and that. And every single person is different, even though mold is like the same, right? It's it's this thing in homes, and everybody has mold in their home. But similar to where I see the trend in medicine going right now to more holistic, functional, integrative type of practices, um, in the house, it's treated this we treat it the same way. While a
Right.
home can have mold, right? It's about understanding how the individual is impacted by it, and really understanding that the way we build, the way we maintain, it allows for mold to form in the home. You can't have zero.
Mm.
And so understanding really which areas in the home are the worst, and then developing the right action plan for cleaning in the house, then it tends to help our clients stop spinning so much, because they truly have a full action plan on how to approach this, and make sure that they're putting the right energy, the right resource, the right finances to the areas in the home that are going to get them the highest return on cleaning that environment and improving the overall air quality and health impact in the building.
Absolutely. So one of my dear friends who was really struggling with infertility, and of course, he diagnosed her with endometriosis and like all these things, finally went to my mold guy, and she ended up having toxic mold. And so they did the evaluation at the house, and just getting rid of her coffee maker and then her books that were handed down generations, like that was 90% of the mold problem, because of course she was drinking coffee every day from the coffee maker.
Yeah.
And she worked in her library because she was an author, so she's around these books all the time. And so
Wow.
it really was something so simple that changed everything. And then like the little pieces in the house where, the person was kind enough to say what you would say, like, we'll get to this, it's not that big of a deal, we'll get to this, and like this is exactly what I recommend and all of that. So I think that that's so important for people to understand that it doesn't have to be this like, I have to move, I have to get my house, like all this stuff. We can make it work, and we have people like Corey who like literally do this all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we do. I mean, we do it all over the country too. And a lot of the times, the clients that we end up seeing, aren't fortunate enough to know somebody like yourself, right? Who has a resource that they can refer to get the right person in the door, or sometimes they don't even have the right support of a practitioner, or even a loved one, a spouse, or somebody guiding them through this. And so it can be very daunting and overwhelming, but allowing that to understand, like, okay, the first thing I need to do is just, where are the problems, and let's prioritize those issues, and then get the action plan on, where do I need to put energy and time? What's the low hanging fruit here? Let's start with a couple of things and see how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, if I'm working to detox and feel better after I've done some of these things, and I'm not progressing, then what's next on the list? What's next on the list, right? And it just makes it a lot easier to go through that process. Um, I want to comment on something you brought up earlier that I feel is really important, and in understanding impact of mold, because it's multifaceted in how it impacts us. And I'm really glad you brought it up, because mold isn't just the spore, right? There's other byproducts that molds produce, and understanding that each of these different byproducts can ultimately have different health impacts,
Mm-hmm.
can answer sometimes this unsolved mystery as to why I'm not feeling well, but my spouse is fine, or
Mm-hmm.
my kids are sick, and me and my partner are completely fine,
Yeah,
right? Which, by the way, is normal.
so
Like,
common.
so it's actually more common for one or two people to not feel well, and everybody else is fine,
Yeah.
right? Like, that is the normal, right? So don't think it's the inverse. It's actually, when we get called in, they're like, everybody is sick, da, 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 we know we're walking into a pretty significant situation. But the majority of the time, it's one person. And as you know, and I've heard your shows a lot, you have to think of the individual, right? We're all built differently. And you think of genetics, previous exposures or lifestyle that can impact, and ultimately other underlying health conditions that can make you more susceptible to these type of exposures. But mold, essentially, to boil it down to an easy understanding, is it produces three main byproducts that we see people react to the most. The first one are spores. So this is what we all know about. Think of them like little microscopic seeds that are floating around in the air. Okay. Now, this is part of the mold's reproductive process. As far as a health implication, you do a lot of research on this. You're going to see things like respiratory issues, allergenic reactions, inflammation within the body. Some of the more, what I'd say, like significant impacts, though, depending on the species, it can colonize us. What that means is it can grow in our nasal passage, it can grow in our gut, it can grow even in our skin, right? So, if our immune system is weakened enough, it can ultimately start to cause to colonize us. That's their job, our world's natural recycler. Now, the second byproduct is something called an MVOC, microbial volatile organic compound. So you're probably familiar with the VOCs from paint, right? The odors that they produce, the off gassing. Yeah. So molds will produce the same thing, and they're called microbial volatile organic compounds. And it's a musty, mildewy, earthy odor. Probably one that your friend around all those books smelt, right? Like you go into a library, you smell it a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so it's part of the mold's digestion process, and it's not always there. It's typically there under the right environmental condition, depending on the type of mold. And usually we hear things like burning eyes, scratchy throats, headaches, almost like an irritant, as many people describe it. And particularly those that are more sensitive to odors and smells. Now, the final is one that I think is probably more popular now, or coming to more of an understanding now, which are mycotoxins. And this is a common way that practitioners are going to start to screen the body, right? So mycotoxins are actual chemicals produced by molds as defense mechanisms. So when you hear somebody say toxic mold, well, yes, they're talking about a particular mold type or species. The toxin they're producing is this metabolite called a mycotoxin. And some of them are actually benign and don't really do anything to us. Others are used in medicine. So penicillin is an antibiotic that's manufactured to create an antibiotic to kill bad bacterial infections in our body, right?
Yeah.
And then you have certain mycotoxins that unfortunately are known to be way more health impacting. So when you look at this, I tend to try and draw people to systemic impact within the body, right? So we're looking at things like immune system disruption. So autoimmune issues, suppression of the immune system, reproductive issues, right? We see a lot of neurological impact. And this spans from pediatric all the way up into elder or adults into elderly, where we see like brain fog issues. We see a lot of forgetfulness. We're hung up on words with kids. A lot of behavioral issues and impacts other types of underlying conditions. There's a lot of practitioners that work on like early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, those sort of things, Parkinson's, because at the end of the day, we're talking about high neurotoxins, right? And then a big one that I hear a lot of people are now impacted by too are gut issues, right? We think air, lungs, right? These things float in the air, but our nose and our mouth, their job is actually to stop particulates before it gets to our lungs. But what's in there? Mucus. Where goes mucus? We breathe in, it goes down into the gut, and not to be gross, but it all ends up there, right? And
Yeah.
so when it gets down there, these spores, right, and these toxins impact our gut. They cause, again, inflammatory responses in the gut. They can kill bacteria in the gut by releasing mycotoxins, right? And so it can cause a lot of issues there as well. And so going back to the original point that you had brought up, when we look at this, I just named so many different symptoms, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, it can be so elusive and hard to zone in. And that's why a lot of times by the point when people are essentially sitting on the phone with us and learning this, sometimes it's years before they really even find somebody like you who's like, you know what, this sounds like mold to me, right? We need to test you. We need to figure out what's going on in your home.
Totally. And I love again, like I just keep picturing these all doctors and it makes me so happy because it really can be so simple. It's like, I'm not feeling well. The doctor says, okay, let's talk about the quality of your air. Let's talk about the quality of your sleep. Let's talk about the quality of your water. That in itself is like opening you to like a whole new reality where you're learning about things like mold, you're learning about things like heavy metals, depending on where you're getting your water, like what's actually in your water, like how your body is processing it. And I will say that I wanted to ask you about like air purifiers because that's like a big question that I get. Air doctor I've heard is great. I got Austin because that's what my mold Chinese medicine best friend told me to get. And it's like my baby. Like I'm in gypsy mode right now. My whole life can fit in my car for a reason. And like my Austin air purifier has his own little seat with like his little seatbelt because he's my baby, because I need my clean air.
I'm just picturing you driving in the car with it. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Strapped in. No, it's good you have these air purifiers, right? So a number just to throw out, we take about 20,000 breaths in a day. Okay.
Yeah.
To visualize that, guys, that's like the size of an Olympic size swimming pool. Okay.
Whoa.
So that is a huge amount of air that's coming in, right? And then we think about all the particulate that's there and these other impacts that come in, it's there's this idea that, oh, well, if I just address mold, then I solve all my problems, right? And that it's a mix, right? It's like you said, you
Yeah.
have to address sleep, you have to address diet, you have to address all these other pillars of health and wellness. But mold can be such an impactful part of that, and it tends to be like air tends to be the last thing that we do. And I am like you, where I have air purifiers in every single room. That may be a bit overkill, but I have
Literally.
air. Yeah, seriously. But I like really find it to be just like drinking water, right? I wouldn't drink unfiltered water. I don't like breathing unfiltered air because I know it's helping bring the particulate down, not just from mold, but from all the other stuff that's happening, the off gassing of these building materials. So
Mhm.
um, Austin Air is a really great product. They not only, depending on the model, not only do particulate, but they also absorb VOCs and things as well in the environment. Air Doctor is good too. You also have IntelliPure is a great brand. They've got a small compact unit that is really affordable. They have a larger unit as well. And then IQ Air is another really, really great product as well. They've got different phases or different models as well, depending on the issue of indoor air quality. They've got ones that are very specific to off gassing. They have ones that are better for particulate. So having an air purifier is great, even if you're just going to go out and get one, not like one of these fancy expensive ones, but even one that you're going to spend a few $100s on to at least bring down particulate in the air is so important.
Absolutely. And I know that the one that I have is like, it's good for 700 square feet. So
Mm-hmm.
for when I was in my little apartment, it was perfect. And then I kind of was like thinking to myself, I'm like, this is going to be interesting because I was going to stay with a friend for a while, and it's 2 floors, but the stairway is like really open. So during the day, I would put it like at the top of the stairs. So it was like kind of in the regular air, like the whole house. And then I'd put it back in my room at night. And I was like, I wonder if anything's going to shift or change. And her dog usually has like crazy allergies, like skin issues. And she didn't have any when we were there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, I think it's at least like a 1,500 square foot house, probably more than that. So
Yeah.
again, like, we like to talk about the energy of things and magic and miracles here. And just when you think of, like the energy of mold and like what it looks like under the microscope, right? Like doesn't look so pretty, right? And it literally looks like in Dr. Emoto's water experiment, like when you talk angrily to your water or mean to it, like it looks exactly the same. And so for anyone out there that's like, yeah, I keep knowing this is me for a long time. Like I'm helping all of these people I'm helping thousands of people for over 12 years with their mold and their illnesses. And then I finally told myself, I'm like, I need to just make sure I'm like not having any issues whatsoever. So I got tested for like literally everything, ended up having really, really bad mold. And then after years of saying I'm gonna buy an air purifier, I'm gonna buy one, I just didn't. I didn't prioritize it. And then I ended up spending, I mean, I got like a little bit of a discount. So I think it ended up being like 700 out the door. But knowing how much it helps me and like anyone who gets to be near it, like including our animals, especially, I think it's such a big piece because a lot of us are like, yes, I want to take care of myself, but like my family comes first. And a lot of us, those are our animals. And I'm sure now people out there are like, I'll spend $700 to take care of my animal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're an extension of us, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the amount of money my dog's in my office with me. I mean, the amount of money that I spend on this little guy, had him for 10 years. It's a good thing I got
Oh,
health insurance, right? Pet insurance. Great,
yeah.
great thing.
What
You
is
know,
he? What
he's a
breed?
cockapoo.
Cute.
Yeah, he's a cutie. He's surprisingly not jumping up when my voice changes. He comes over immediately, but he's sleeping.
Oh, I love that.
um, but yeah, we always think that we're the only ones who get impacted by this, and it's
Yeah.
not just us, right? And
Yeah.
there are further impacts. One of the first ways, if you do any research on mycotoxins, one of the first ways mycotoxins actually came into effect or realization of it was through like testing animal blood, right? And
Mm.
so there's a lot of understanding that we get from mycotoxins through our animals, and they can show the signs of that. The harder part is they can't really tell us what's going on, right?
I know.
Um, and there's other instances where, because of the significance, you sometimes have animals that get into that fight or flight aspect, right? And where they're
Yeah.
really skittish all the time in certain things, and you can't really figure out why. Many times it can be environmental of what's going on within the home.
Yeah. And I use this example a lot because I think it's important for people to think about like their bodies are so small and they have basically 4 feet with skin, which is basically the third brain, it's the largest
Mm-hmm.
organ. So they have twice as many opportunities to have bad things kind of going through their paw pads. And then their little noses are so close to the ground. So if you have bad air and you're using like toxic floor cleaner, like they're ingesting all of that so much faster than we are.
Oh yeah. So I want to go down the path on this with you because um, understanding how our impact happens and the products we use in the home are really important. So when mold, spores, and all these things are released, right? They don't just stay in the air forever. They fall. They may be microscopic. So like a full spore is a half the size of one single human hair. You can't see it, right?
Oh,
So right now it's floating in front of us. The reason why you're able to see it on a surface, like where it's clustered, is because you're seeing billions and billions of mold spores clustered together on a surface. Okay.
mm-hmm.
So what the colony does where it's growing is it releases these spores into the air. Okay. Either through disturbance or naturally. Okay. Disturbance can be just building pressure, and then natural release if it has the right environmental conditions, right? Just like a tree would create different pollens or things to grow more trees. Molds will use these spores to grow more. And so when they get in the air, they're in the air, but they're still weight to them. We have gravity on this planet, right? So things fall down into the dust. Okay. And
Mm,
so do you remember Snoopy as a kid? Do you remember that cartoon?
of course.
Do you remember Pigpen, the little dude that would walk around with all the dirt around him?
Yeah.
Yeah, little guy, right? So we're actually doing that. We just don't see it. Okay. It's called the human cloud effect. So
Mm,
as you're walking around, you're re-aerosolizing everything into your breathing zone. You sit down on your couch, anything that is settled on the couch re-aerosolizes, right? So if you have a mold problem in your home, your spore count levels are already elevated because you have this little mini mold factory somewhere in your home, maybe hidden in a wall, maybe in your ventilation, under the floor, wherever, and it's producing all of these byproducts that become airborne and eventually settle out into the dust. Okay. And so with pets, they're closest to the ground. They aerosolize that very easily. But even us, we're kicking all of those things up, right? And so dust in a home, and here it is. Here's the plug. Ready? Decluttering your house to make sure that you do not have a lot of dust building up is so important. It's not just the air purifiers, it's also making sure that we're having not a lot of places that dust can settle and that we're cleaning on a regular basis. And with the cleaning side of things, I won't go too deep on this, but please don't use bleach. Please don't use this like harsh, very toxic chemical. I know we are taught and trained that bleach is going to make things look pretty and clean, but when it actually comes to visible mold growth, bleach is like the worst thing that you can use.
wow.
Uh, and the reason why is because if you look at bleach, okay, the molecules are too big to penetrate through the substrate. So off the shelf bleach is mixed with water and then the chemical compound of bleach. Okay. It's diluted down. So when you use it and you pour it onto something, what happens is that bleach evaporates very quickly. So what are you left with? Water. What does
Mm,
mold love? Water,
water.
right? And so the bleach will kill the surface, but now the water is going to penetrate into what it's growing on. And now we talked about molds being an organism that has defense mechanisms, right? It has its own chemicals it can produce, right? So now it's going to grow back and it's going to grow back and it's going to feel threatened. So it can produce these mycotoxins and all of these other things you don't want it to be doing. So there are in your home more natural cleaning products that you can use. We actually have I'm going to give you a cool little thing to throw into the show notes. It's a document. It's how to clean your stuff. It has an
Cool.
overview. I'll give it free for everybody who's
Thank
listening.
you. We would
Of
love
course,
that. We
yeah.
love cleaning.
And yeah, I know, me too. I'm a freak about it. So it's like what to do, how to avoid, like what things, like what should I be tossing, what should I keep, that sort of process. But really, I mean, with mold, it's not about killing it. It's about using the right solutions, like antifungal solutions, and then removing it from the
Mhm.
home. And this idea of killing something is so dangerous in my industry. And it creates a lot of problems for people. And if there's something that I hope that people really walk away from today, if you ever have somebody telling you the way to get rid of something in your home is by killing it, it's the wrong answer. And
Yeah.
the reason being is because a dead mold spore still carries the same allergenic, respiratory impacts, toxigenic nature, just like a peanut, right? If you have somebody with a peanut allergy and you give them a peanut off a plant or a roasted peanut that cannot grow, and you ingest either of those, they're going to react. All we're doing by killing a mold spore is saying you can't grow mold anymore, but that mold spore is still in your home. So it needs to be removed through proper remediation, proper cleaning methodologies to get it out of the house.
Totally. And if you're watching on YouTube and you're like, why does Fallon have this face of disgust on her face? It's because when the first time I met with my friend and doctor who helped me with my mold, it was years ago. I went with a friend and he said it to me and I've heard him say it a million times and it just gets stuck in my head. I'm a very visual person. He's like, so we're killing the mold, but like we don't kill it and not expect the skeletons to stay in your body.
Yeah,
And he's
that's
like,
actually cool. I
and
like
so
that.
we had a whole different, so there's a second part of the protocol that helps
Mhm.
with getting the skeletons out.
Yeah, I'm actually going to take that. That's a great analogy,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
know, even when it colonizes you, you have to kill it and then you have to remove it. There is a great podcast that we did on our show called Mold Finders Radio, and we talked to a practitioner called Jill Krista. I don't know if you're familiar with her. And she talks about how when these molds colonize us, the secondary impact in the body, right? You have to,
Yeah.
it's not just remediation and fix the home and then it's an on-off switch and I feel better. It doesn't, it doesn't work like that. Like that's where people like yourself, like Fallon, comes into play. That's where practitioners come into play to really say, okay, now we have a fighting chance here. Now we can actually start to heal and get you better, because otherwise we're standing in a swimming pool and trying to dry off at the same time. It's not possible, right?
Yeah.
We need to be able to have a good environment that is allowing professionals like yourself really help the patient and the client get to where they need to go.
Yeah. And I think it's so beautiful. We're talking about the body, this ridiculously awesome vessel that we were given, and then our home. And it's like you said, like it's not about killing something and then just like magically everything gets better. We're actually transmuting it, just like we teach in personal development, right? Like transmute this anger, this fear into, forgiveness. And then, you end up getting to like love and acceptance and things like that. And it's really the same thing when no matter what we're talking about.
Yeah, it is. It is. You have to give yourself the opportunity to be better, to be safer, because, here's the thing. I don't, a lot of times when people think about mold, it's like how, like I need to run away from it always, forever, and I
Yeah.
never need to see it again, right? And that's physically impossible. It's not possible,
Yeah.
right? And so the goal isn't for you to be running, looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Really, what we want to try and do here is create more of a sanctuary in the
Mm.
environment, a safe haven, so that when you go to your friend's house who had the mold issue, or you go on a trip and maybe you're not in the best hotel room, or you go to your grocery store, which, next time you're in your grocery store, look at the look at the ceiling in your grocery store, and you're
Oh
just gonna be
God.
like, oh, I wish that Corey didn't tell me that. But like, my point here is that there's always going to be micro exposures throughout your life, right?
Right.
And our bodies are beautiful, right? They are vessels that have allowed us to live all the way through where we're at right today, right?
Yeah.
Against all odds. Heal itself from crazy bacterial infections and all these things that we get impacted by throughout our lives. And mold shouldn't be the thing that does it for you, right? Your body has the functionality to primarily handle these type of micro exposures. Um, but you need a place to go back and allow your body to do what it needs to do. And sometimes along those ways of where our detox pathways are, sometimes there are genetic mutations that impact that. Sometimes there are injuries, whether it be viral, bacterial, or physical, that can affect how we methylate or how we detoxify, right? And we may need help. We may need help for that, but we always need to understand that you don't need to have zero. You just need to have a place that's safer to go back to really push you through.
100%. And I appreciate you sharing that, especially with what you do in your background, because, I think there's a lot of people when they were sick for so long and they find out it was mold, or like Lyme disease is another one too. You're like looking over your shoulder, like making sure there's no bugs, like making sure
Yeah.
you don't smell anything. That's part of like kind of like the ascension process, right? Is like, yes, this is the reality. What do I have control over? And what can I do to be my highest and best so that I am basically just like invincible to any of these things? And I can take the things that I've already learned up to this point, like talking kindly to my water, and like when I drink it, letting my, sometimes when I'm thinking, now I'll be thinking about it because we talked about it. But there's times where I just laugh because like I'm such a water person. Like I need water to function, like pools, lakes, rivers, puddles, whatever. Just I need water. And then I laugh because it's like that polarity, right? Like I need the water to heal. I need the water to feel better. Like, astrology water is all about your emotions and your feelings, but then it's like that's how mold is born. It's born when there's too much water in a place and it doesn't have anywhere else to go. And I just think there's so many opportunities that we have every day where we can really just take our power back, especially once we've experienced that level of health that we really, really wanted. Like, my friend ended up having like a pretty relatively easy, loving pregnancy with twins. They were born naturally, no drugs, like no C-section. And it was because she finally knew what it felt like to feel good. And she was like, I'm taking my power back. And especially when it comes to my health. And, that means having the right information and, trusting your intuition that you're working with the right people.
Yeah, you're right. I think on that note too, getting that information and how you do it is really important too. Like um, data can be very confusing or misleading if you're not applying the right test to understanding on what's going on within the home.
Right.
So there's a couple ways how we approach this with clients. So the dust test is a product that we created. It's based off a panel called ERMI, which stands for Environmental Relative Moldiness Index. It's actually created by the EPA from a study that they performed where they
Wow.
surveyed 1,100 homes. Yeah, so the EPA went out,
Cool.
surveyed 1,100 homes, and what they did is they asked them, "Hey, do you have mold in your home or dampness, or no, you're not aware of?" And they grouped them into these two categories, and they tested the dust, like we've been talking, to understand what molds were commonly found in each type of house. Okay. So essentially, they came up with this index of 36 common indoor mold species, 26 of them from buildings with histories of water damage and mold, 10 of them with no reported history of water damage. And
Mm.
then they looked at the geometric mean of each of these different molds and set the thresholds for normality. What is considered normal? Because again, you can't have zero, right? And so we then took that data, that information, and we compare it to a set of inspections that we've performed that we inspect to determine, based off what we're seeing here, how likely is it that there's an issue, and giving a code value from 1 to 5. Hey, yeah, if you're falling into anything from a 3 to a 5, there's enough load in the home that's indicating there's sources there, albeit whether it be from contents like you're talking about, right? From books or machines or refrigerators with drinking spigots, like we see issues in there all the time, right? Anytime you disturb, you create spores. They push them into the environment, right? And so we're able to essentially help clients if they're unsure if there's a problem here. Mold cannot hide in the dust. It's impossible. Okay. It can hide behind walls. It could hide in the air, because depending on where you collect that sample, how long you collect it for, time of day, humidity, temperature, all of these things, they don't have a huge range. But dust is everywhere, right?
Mm.
And so when you look about screening your home, it gives a really great understanding of what's going on settling out on the surface, whether that's a viable spore, meaning it can grow, a non-viable dead spore, meaning it can't grow, or even what we see a lot of times is it's a spore from an area that is dry. There's no more moisture there. And
Mm.
so it's it's split into pieces. It's still going to be able to pick up the DNA because that's what it's based on. It's based off PCR. And so it's able to tell the DNA of that type of mold species and give a good indication as to whether or not there is a load that's high enough to impact the home. And then it's about really understanding situational, right? A renter is going to have a different situation than a homeowner, and
Right.
just even boiling it down to living. And then there's other things that go into that too. So we also then not only just say, hey, go do a dust test and here's your results, but also let's talk about it. So every person who does a dust test, we do a 20-minute phone call with, and we look to explain the results. But what is your situation? Like,
Yeah.
hey, are you in a rental and your landlord is not a great person and all they care about is turning money out of your place? And anytime you even have an issue, they're making a huge deal about it and gaslighting you and telling you there's no problem here. Well, we've already invested money in just getting the data and information. Maybe it's about finding a new place, getting out of that bad toxic energy, really focusing on a better environment that you can really begin to get your power back, empowering yourself, like you just said, your friend did, right? And then for some people who own the home, who love where they are, maybe their kids are in the school district, they love their neighbors, whatever it may be, and don't want to move, well, then you have the data to understand, okay, I do need to bring in a professional to help me figure out where this is coming from, because maybe I know of one or two things, but just like uh, your friend went through, it's never one problem, right? There's always multitudes of things going on in a building. Not all of them are created equal. And many times the problem that you know about is not the most significant problem in your home. And
Mm,
so really getting a professional to guide you on, hey, look, this is truly the issue. Let's start here. I'm so glad you brought up your friend's case because it's like textbook. It's textbook the issue that I see all the time. We assume that the problem over here is the issue, but actually, if I do these few things here, I got 90% better. It's
exactly.
amazing, right? And so, really utilizing the proper tools to screen your home first is a great way to get into this. Now, if you are, I've had floods, I've had leaks, I've had all these things, and you're listening to this and going, oh my God, Corey, I've had all these problems and I didn't dry it properly. I just let it dry on its own and all these things. Then yeah, I don't necessarily think you need to screen your home, right? You may have, you're likely going to have sources there, and you don't need to start with a test. But it is definitely an option. You could, go right to an inspection and further testing if you know of some issues instead of just waiting to get that data back to confirm it.
Yeah. And I mean, I love data just because like I needed it to help people see the light of what's really going
Yeah.
on in the reality. But I had a friend, she's a naturopath and a mold specialist, but she could smell people's hair and tell if they had mold. So it was like her superpower. And she could do that in places. And of course, the universe somehow put us in the same at the same conference. We didn't know why we were going. I think it was just for us to hang out. And our hotel room, she's like, there's mold in here. I'm like,
Oh
it's
man.
fine. We'll drink lots of water. Literally at a conference. Um, you've probably heard of them. I can't think of the brand right now. They're they specialize in supplements for the gut, and Megaspore is actually one of their
The
main.
cell core? The cell core,
Maybe
maybe.
I literally just went because like the universe said I needed to go, and then I found out she was going, and we went. But it's just funny because their biggest seller for resetting the gut microbiome, especially in people with leaky gut and um, H. pylori and autism stuff, is called Megaspore.
Yeah. Well, I
So
mean, it's all in the gut, right? It connects up to the brain.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's so funny that you brought the hotel situation up because anytime I go on a trip with my wife and my son, they wait in the lobby while I go look at the room. And I
yeah,
probably change two or three times. I just stay at check-in. Hey, just so
yeah.
you know, this is what I do. I'm really picky. I'm gonna change it. I'll go and look, but I'll be back probably two or three times. I should just put that in the notes when I book a hotel. But yeah, at the end of the day, like none of these buildings are impervious to it, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of times, goes back to what we were talking about before. That's that micro exposure that you get, and chugging the water, bringing this stuff down, trying to lessen the time in the hotel room as much as you can, and try and really feel feel like you're getting a lot of this stuff out of your body as much as you can is key when you're doing some of these traveling. And don't be afraid to
Yeah.
switch your room. Do it all the time.
Oh, I am the same, except it's not my husband or child, it's my cat. I'm like, I gotta check out the room before I put my precious angel in there because he had respiratory issues. And then when we got the air filter or they got the air purifier and everything, switched our cleaners and things like that. I cannot wait for that thing you're gonna give us about the cleaning stuff.
Yeah.
His respiratory issues went away.
Yeah, and I find that a lot of times too, like again, back to this idea of low hanging fruit, right? You have these more acute type symptoms that can come up, and just doing this, cleaning, air purifiers, right, reduction, right supplies while doing all of that is key. And for those that are listening that are they've tried that and unfortunately nothing is moving, I don't want that I don't want you to be feel that that is going to be a deterrent, right? Because at the end of the day, again, everybody reacts differently to this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, and I'm sure Fallon, a lot of the people that you see, unfortunately, are in more chronic state, right? And when that happens, it just means that we have to go a little bit deeper on things, right? And we can do the small things now to get us in the right mindset to face the bigger things down the road of what we need to do, and know that you have somebody by your side. I love that you said this, like having faith and trust in the people that you're working with. Is it okay, Fallon, if I throw a couple of questions out that I think people should be asking when they're, yeah, you think that's a good idea?
We would love that.
Cool. Yeah. So I think it's really important when you're talking to inspection companies, it's important to know first and foremost when you get on the phone with somebody what they do. I know that sounds crazy,
No.
but it's a mold inspector. When you Google it, you're going to get a ton of different things, right? And so the way that the industry is actually set up is there's two companies, okay? There's the inspection and testing side of the industry and what's called the remediation and restoration side of the industry. So the inspection and testing, they're the companies that either do one of two things. One, they come in, they do what's called air quality checks, which essentially means they're going to be in your house from anywhere between 30 minutes to 2 hours, and they're going to sell you on doing air tests all over your home. Okay.
Yeah.
They're going to be very, very low entry as far as cost. And unfortunately, the data from that is typically really poor. Okay. So, but if you're looking just for how's my air at a particular time of day and you want that, that exists. Okay. The second type is a company that's more like what we do, what we inspect, where we're actually investigating, inspecting, and testing the home. Those assessments are going to last 4 to 6 hours or more, depending on the size of the house. There's going to be more targeted testing, meaning inside walls, floor, ceiling, small isolated areas. And really the goal of a company like ours is actually giving you an action plan on how to remediate the home. And that remediation plan is what goes to the remediation and restoration companies to do the actual physical cleanup. And now that's key. A separate company does the cleanup and testing. If you call a company and they tell you, oh, no problem, we'll come out for free, they're not an inspection company. They're a remediation company that's going to try and sell you on remediation within your home.
Yeah.
And so typically it's a very cursory inspection. They're just looking for moisture. And really all they're looking to do is find one or two very obvious areas and try and push you to sell you on that cleanup. Okay. So really understanding, first question, what do you do? Are you an inspection and testing company or are you a remediation company? Right? If they say we do both, you hang up the phone.
Boom.
Okay. That's it. Thank you. Have a great day. Right? There are actually states where it's illegal to do both. Okay. That there's separation between the two. So that means the second question that you want to ask is, are you certified? Are you licensed in what you do in the state that you operate in? Okay. So making sure you ask those questions. I will say, guys, the certification, the licensing process is
I
You
literally
could,
can't even imagine.
you could get it in a week. You could go take an online course and get it in a week. Okay. So understanding if they have that is important, because if you go down the path of insurance or any of that stuff, like
Yeah,
they're going to require that you have somebody certified and licensed. But just know that that doesn't really mean a whole lot. You really want to lean on, okay, next question, who do you typically work with? Right? Give me a little bit of background, right? If they're saying, well, a lot of management companies, a lot of landlords, commercial properties, da da da, not probably aligned with somebody that's dealing with their home and their health, right?
yeah,
And then you can ask, what type of testing do you do, right? Oh, if I only do air sampling or swab sampling, you're missing what's in the dust. You're missing all these
right.
other points, right? So have them walk through what their day looks like, all of those things. On the remediation side, when you're interviewing them, you want to help have them understand, or you want them to help explain to you if they understand the report, right? Hey, I'm going to send you my report. I would like you to look at it and tell me if this, tell me what makes sense. Do you have any questions? Da, da, da. I can't tell you the amount of times that we've put together very, very thorough reports and a remediation contractor shows up and they can't even understand it. They're like, what is a ERMI? What are mycotoxins? Like, guys, this is not the right company for you,
Yeah,
right? They need to understand the health impact and the type of testing and remediation that was done, because it's not going to be the service that you're looking for. So really making sure that you're asking questions and being and feeling that that is your right to do so, and and allowing that to unfold, and they should be very open and receptive to those questions before you ever engage with an inspection company or even down the road a remediation company.
totally. So I've never said this before. This is very exciting. I
Mhm.
think everyone should definitely listen to this again and take notes on some of the things that Corey shared. But also, I'm like hearing this through the lens of going to the doctor. And then you see your
Mhm.
first quote unquote certified health coach who
Yeah,
did a week-long class and really doesn't understand anything that they're trying to help people with. It's really like the same thing. And it's
it
about
is.
it's so cool. But I was
Yeah,
just
it's
hearing it through that lens and I was like, that's really, really cool. Like it's just how everything is connected.
yeah, and I think that the importance, I kind of mirrored our business through this, right? Like I when we started to look at the journey of how we interact with clients, it needs to be the same type of feeling and support that they get when they find Fallon, when they find you, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
the holding of the hand of really truly, like when we started, you're like, I truly care, right? About each person that I work with and making sure that I'm supporting them through their journey. And unfortunately, in our industry, and even in the medical industry, it's true too, but like in our industry, it feels very overwhelmingly run through with people that are going to try and just come in, get in and out really fast, high volume type of process, instead of really getting to know who they're working with and their individual challenges, and developing an action plan that's going to suit them and serve them the best.
Yeah. So I have a funny story to share.
Yeah, I love funny stories.
So back to this couple, because they're just like the prime example, right? And again, like
Mm-hmm.
she went in for infertility, did exploratory surgery. I can't deal, can't stand the thought of unnecessary surgery. So when she got to this point in the journey and she was fortunate enough to meet with someone with you who said you need to ask these questions and like da 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 da, which is why everyone needs to know this and go back and write it down. Um, for whatever reason, like her husband was having a lot of anxiety about it. He's like, this is gonna cost so much money, and she's like, you know what? I'm not gonna tell you one thing, and I'm gonna let you do this your way. And of course, guess what he did? He Googled and he didn't ask any of those questions. And he had multiple people come out from multiple different types of companies. And they all told him it was going to be like over $10,000 of remediation needed to the house. And then he had a meltdown and then finally went to his wife and he's like, I need help. They said that it was going to cost this much money and multiple people said it. So it must be right. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to do it my way. she did it her way, and they got everything that they needed for significantly less than what they were quoted. And like I said at the beginning, like just getting rid of the coffee maker in the books because the person knew how to properly test the home in all of the spaces and they figured that out. It was a 4-story house. This wasn't like an easy
Yeah.
evaluation. Just that alone helped so much with everything that they were both dealing with. He didn't even realize how sick he was until he got better. But it was just funny because sometimes we kind of have to like, let them do their thing and then be like, oh yeah, I probably should have done this like the more efficient way that didn't cause me to have like a massive panic attack and waste 3 days of me having to watch this man walk around my house.
Yeah. The unfortunate part, Fallon, and I'm glad that your friend, knew of a different path, but I'll give you a great example. I spoke to somebody a couple days ago, and she's really sick, unfortunately. And she had somebody, she knew of a leak in her attic. She had somebody come out. They went only to the attic. They looked up in the attic. They're like, yeah, you got to remediate this. They didn't look anywhere else in the home. They only looked in the attic. And it was like $25,000 to remediate her attic.
Oy.
And she paid, and she did it.
Wow.
And then what are your expectations, right? Your expectations are, I just spent $25,000 on this house. I should start to feel better. She moves in and she is worse than she was before, right?
Mm.
And I'm talking with her, and she's not even a client. We're just chatting, because she's calling in to try and figure out her next steps. And I'm asking her about the history of her home. She's had multiple leaks in other areas of the house, right? And she's like, I just assumed that because I had this guy come out and he saw this and he visually can see it, that was going to be the area that was going to solve all this. And unfortunately, it wasn't. And for many people, it's about putting the resource towards the right area of the home, because while it looked so bad up there, it and may have helped, right? It clearly wasn't the true thing that was really impacting her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working with companies, the goal is giving you an action plan, because hey, the $25,000 that you spent there, um, that may have gone to 2 or 3 other projects in the general living areas of the home, or maybe you would have found something else inside that house that could have been covered by insurance, right?
Yeah.
And was a high priority area, and you can tap into them and you can try and negotiate with your remediation company. It's like, hey, I've got insurance coverage over here. How do I reduce my costs in the attic since you're already here, right? And really start to be more strategic on how we do this. Because unfortunately, it's not like selling her house is going to solve all of her problems.
Right.
When we talk right now, Fallon, and the way that the economy is currently, we have really inflated housing prices. We have high interest rates on borrowing money right now. And so to sell, you're kind of moving laterally. And then you're with the devil you don't know versus the devil you know. And many times these homes that are being sold, they're prepped, they're painted, they're very difficult to see issues. They're lighting candles so it smells good in there,
Yep.
and you move laterally, and now you got to invest here, and then it becomes this onion of problems that you don't know about when you start peeling. And so I moving always sounds like this great idea, but before you even get to that point, really start to understand what could be going on in your home. And maybe there it is too much and it's too much of a project. Okay, so then how do I find a new place to go to? And even before you order a dust test, even before you hire an inspector, when you're trying to buy a place, there are a couple of things that you can look for. Okay. And so again, take out that pen and paper and write this down. There's signs of water damage, footprints that water leaves behind. The key to finding mold in the home, I'm going to give my trade secret away here, is don't look for mold. Okay. We all know what mold looks like. Everybody
Yeah.
knows, right? It's black, it's green, It's yellow sometimes, right? Sometimes it can get very difficult where it's dust-like or gray. But for the most part, if you're walking around the house, you see mold, you know what it looks like, right? What we don't pay a lot of attention to is the water damage, because on the surface, it just looks like, oh, this is dry, it's fine,
Right.
right? But what happens behind those areas is really the problem, right? So you look for staining on surfaces, right? So yellowish colors. You look for cracking, separation of building materials at things like crown molding or baseboards, particularly under windows or on exterior walls or near areas where you have moisture. Okay, bubbling, bulging, and then in areas where you have metals, where you're seeing rusts, or even on stone, like underneath in crawl spaces or in basements, if you're seeing this powder-like substance, these are all signs of moisture that either is current or even was there, and we stopped the moisture. But guess what? Mold doesn't disappear, doesn't pack up its bags and move to another area. It's not an animal, it's like a plant,
Yeah.
and it will stay and plant roots and remain, right? So, even if you have to go down the route of, I'm going to move, or you know what, before I order a dust test, let me just look around my house and see if there's things going on here. Look for those signs of problems, and that's actually where your mold is going to be hiding.
Amazing. Yeah, I when I hear the word like chronic illness, the first question I want to ask, which, I don't get to do very often because I don't feel led to do that to every single person that I overhear. But I wanted to say, have you noticed having a leak in your house? Because then it opens up the conversation. Because if you just say like, have you lived somewhere with mold? Most people are going to say no, or most people are going to be saying, yeah, but like, what does it have to do with anything? But when I ask, like, have you had a leak in your house? It like really opens up that conversation, which I'm sure you do even more beautifully than I do.
Yeah.
That helps people start building the pieces, because it is a lot of overwhelming information, especially for that poor woman, you know, if she's like, yeah, I can't live here anymore, but I'm not going to allow the next person here to move into this house and have any of their own health issues. So I also think that there's such a beautiful component too of like you being like second generation. I love everything generational healing, but also just like leaving things better than you found it, right? Like that was something that I feel like a good parent teaches their children, like always leaving things better than you found it. When you borrow someone's car, you fill up the gas tank. Like same with the house. Like if you're going to move and do all these things, like it can't necessarily just be because like there's something wrong with the house. Like that's one of the things that I love to do, right? Like I love to like do energy healings on houses and like, you know, give them blessings and things like that. And I think there's just so many more tools where we can, again, like when I hear the word chronic, and if anyone here is listening, like when you hear the word chronic illness, like there's a really good chance that it's mold, like a very, very good chance. It's just, you might not be able to just jump right on it. You might have to ask like a little breadcrumb and then like send them the link to this podcast. But
Yeah.
but it's just so many people just don't like, they don't understand, and they've probably seen so many doctors and probably a lot of therapists too, and they're like, it can't be almost like this one little thing that's ruining my whole life, and it's like actually it kind of can be.
Unfortunately, for many it is, and
Yeah.
it a lot of times, for so many, it takes years to find. I think we're getting
Mm-hmm.
better. I think
Yeah.
there's more of a trend where the conference I mentioned earlier, where I showed up and I was the only one in the room with all those doctors. Fast forward to today, there's a ton of conferences now that have tracks specifically on mold.
Yeah.
There's a lot more adoption even into Western medicine on the impact. So you're definitely seeing access happen a lot easier for people, and they're finding it a little bit easier. But still, what's crazy to me is this fallacy, this stigma is the right word, the stigma around mold itself. Say, oh, you have mold. Yeah, so do you. So do
Yeah.
you. Like
Yeah.
everybody has mold in their home,
Yeah.
right? So it shouldn't be treated that way. It should be looked upon. Oh wow, yeah. Let's surround you with good energy, good vibes, and help to get you across this bridge, because unfortunately, if you've been chronically dealing with this for so long, it's not just like the body that's impacted, it's financial, it's stress on the, if they are in a marriage, if they're in a family, it's stress on the family.
Yeah,
The therapist side of things, we have, when people call in, we have somebody called an empowerment coach, right? And their job is to empower our callers, whether they work with us or not. We want them leaving the call feeling empowered to taking the next step. And, you know, sometimes it's a therapy session, Fallon. It's nothing
totally.
more than a 30-minute phone call of somebody just like talking because they're finally being heard.
Exactly.
Finally, somebody's listening to them,
Yeah,
right? And so we tend to think, particularly about this with mold, that, like, you can notice it, you can see it. It's like this invisible illness, though, that you can't see, and it impacts so many.
absolutely. I'm glad you said the visibility piece because it's similar to mental health, right? And like my background was seeing people who were coming in for quote unquote mental health psychiatric issues, but we found out it was mold. And so when you're looking at it from that lens, it's like, oh, we have the stigma around mental health and like even this acceptance of like, this is just how I am. I'm just this like really anxious person. And it's like, well, maybe you're actually not. Maybe God's actually like, you're meant to actually live like without any anxiety and like full trust all the time and like living in joy. And the mold is the thing. Because again, it's a dark, gross thing that's taking over you and literally causing you fear. So it's just crazy when I think back to the thousands of clients I was with who were like, yeah, I've been depressed my whole life. And then I look in the corner of their profile and it's like 67 years old. I'm like, when you say your whole life, they're like, I guess I'm going here. This woman, I'll never forget her. She came from the whole other side of the world to come to this clinic where I worked, and it was a mold issue. And she's like depressed. Like I remember when I was 3 years old, I dug a hole and I put myself in there and I tried to bury myself alive. And I was like, I'm just sitting there typing. I'm like, okay, like
Wow.
that is crazy. So even just the mental health stigma is most of it is the problem relate that a lot of the time can be related to mold because mold it tackles your brain, it tackles your gut. So you could have concussions, you could have been diagnosed with, leaky gut and even feel like you're being quote unquote treated for that. But if you're not getting to the root, then it's not going to do anything. So
You nailed it. Yeah, absolutely. It's the mental health side of thing is actually very often overlooked when it comes to mold.
mm-hmm.
And actually, I'm going to be attending the integrative mental health conference here in San Diego
Yay.
in fall. We've done it in the past, but they have a lot of great practitioners who go to this, and they have tracks on mold. They talk
Mm-hmm.
about it. We're literally
Yeah.
talking about a neurotoxin.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great doctor by the name of Pejman Katarai, who's out in LA area, who does a lot of pediatric impact of mold
Yeah, I just
on the
started
brain.
following him.
He's excellent. So
Yeah.
a great guy, a friend of mine, and he just put out an amazing study on the link between uh, primarily autism and this type of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying that like close to 50% of these cases could be related back to the environment. And it's we don't think of these things, right?
Yeah.
We're thinking of, oh, mold, you're gonna sneeze and you're gonna cough, and that's it. There's nothing else related to that. But science has advanced so much in the past 10 years where that dust test that I talked about before, if you're working with a doctor, we can literally correlate it to what's in your body. We can
Yeah.
literally line up the mold species in your home and say this toxin in your body, that mold right there, it makes that.
Yeah.
So, we're able to really start to to drive people to that health to home connection a lot more than when I started doing this, at when I was 17 years old. So like there is a lot more that has come out and continues to develop. There's a lot of great studies that have gone through. If you're in an area where you need help too, we started a foundation. I was one of the founding members of a foundation called Change the Air Foundation. and even just access to understanding what your rights are in
Yeah,
the state that you're in. Please visit Change the Air. They do a phenomenal job. The individuals who are running that foundation now on raising awareness, actually getting bills into state legislation and to make change because of how overlooked this common thing is.
that's amazing and so important because I mean, there are some states, right, that are typically like more or like certain areas of the world where they're more impacted by mold, obviously. And so having an eye on that, especially like if you're in one of those states, you're thinking of like moving to one of those states, I think it's really important for people to have the information. So I'll definitely make sure I put a little link to that. And then
Awesome.
what are some of the other fun links that I'm going to put below?
So you're gonna have yeah. So Change the Air is great. That's the foundation I mentioned. I'm gonna give you guys the free cleaning guide, which is amazing. And then
Yay.
I'll of course put the link, give you the link for the dust test, which is where you can order that kit, and then a link to where you can find out more about We Inspect. I'll make sure I throw that in there as well.
Amazing. And you said that you guys go everywhere, right?
Oh, we have a very large footprint. We don't subcontract. Everything is done with our individual worker, field inspectors, and they're regionalized throughout the country.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. I know a lot of minds are blown in a very good way. And I know more and more people are going to come back and listen just because there's so much misinformation out there. And I'm just so grateful for all of the amazing tools and resources that you shared with us.
I'm just so glad that you have created this stage to allow this conversation to happen because there's a lot of people that don't want these conversations to happen, right? And so
Yeah.
the ability to have these conversations and be open to it, and the power that you have where you're able, you said this before we started the call, and I just it made a big impact. Even if there's one thing in this whole story of what we just talked about that changes and shifts your mind, then it was worth every minute of it. And thank you for doing what you do. People, I don't, I'm sure you understand the reach of what you do, but shows like this are so needed. So thank you.
Absolutely. Awesome. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and definitely check out all the amazing links and get in Corey and Moldfinder's world. And please share this episode with a friend if it was helpful. And we love you so much. See you soon.